No, you didn't miss anything. Yes, the title of this review is correct, and yes, this is a review of the episode from the Sunday prior to yesterday rather than the episode that aired yesterday. I alluded to it a little bit last week, but I had a horrible bug weekend before last, and it really got in the way of me getting some of my extraneous reviews done. I love doing Doctor Who content, but I do prioritize my other stuff over it, hence why I decided to skip it while I was sick, so that I'd have the energy to do other stuff. That said, I do plan to catch up on these reviews. They're not going to be backlogged like this for very long. I would say that by next week, hopefully, I'll be caught up again. For those who don't know, this season only has 10 episodes, so this is the halfway point of the season now. This episode. The end of it, specifically. So I do have plans to put together a video on my thoughts about the season so far. That may even go up later today. I'm not really sure when I'm going to get it done. But that does mean that I haven't watched yesterday's episode yet. I'm trying to get this video done before I watch anything from the second half of the season. There's no real reason why. It's how I like to do things. So please, no spoilers for The Demons of something. I'm not sure of the full title. No spoilers for that episode in the comments of this review, please. That said, let's talk about the 5th episode of, what is this, Series 11? The Tsuranga Conundrum, I believe it's called. And wow, was this a perfectly average episode of Doctor Who. I've never seen a more perfectly average episode of Doctor Who in my entire life. At the start of this episode, the Doctor and her companions are on a junk planet, just being the Doctor and her companions. And through a series of unfortunate events, they end up injured on a hospital ship, a Tsurangan hospital ship. They're sort of deep space triage units slash ambulances, I guess you would say, that scoop people up who are hurt or dying and offer them as much help as they can on the way to one of the Tsurangan hospital space stations that are peppered throughout the universe. But that does mean that the Doctor is separated from Hernândez in this episode. She's trapped on the ship, and she has a bit of separation anxiety when it comes to the TARDIS now, having been separated from it just recently. So she overreacts a little bit at the top of the episode and doesn't quite remember where she has heard the word Tsuranga before, doesn't realize that this is a hospital ship, doesn't realize that they're just trying to help her. It was a fantastic scene with some really cool character stuff that really showed off Jodie Whittaker's acting chops. Like, the lady can do borderline melodrama without feeling like she's chewing the scenery at all, which is just fantastic. This ship is mostly automated, though, and it is heading towards a hospital, a place where you wouldn't want something dangerous to get to, so when a dangerous creature called a Pating, an adorable little thing that rivals the adipose and how cute it is in terms of Doctor Who monsters, crashes its way onto the ship and endangers everyone on it, there is a real risk that a detonation command will be sent to the ship, destroying it, preventing the Pating from getting to the space station. So it's up to the Doctor to thwart that as she deals with the Pating, trying to get it off of the ship safely, and that's easier said than done. The Pating is a virtually indestructible creature. It can digest any inorganic material. It doesn't eat organic things, thankfully, or else everybody on the ship would have been screwed immediately. Except for the android. There was an android character in this episode. He was pretty cool, and he probably would have been fine in that scenario. And that's what the rest of the episode is about. The Doctor's companions interact with some of the other patients on this hospital ship, but really, that's the entire episode. The Doctor working out how to attract this thing, work out what it is exactly that it wants and or needs, and then find a way to use that to get it off the ship. We meet a lady general slash pilot and her brother, who's an engineer, and they had a really interesting dynamic between the two of them because neither one of them really appreciates the other's choice of career as much as they themselves do. And so there's this strain on their relationship, not to mention the fact that the lady general is lying about why she's here in the first place to her brother. And one of the points that this episode leads to is the two of them putting aside their differences in order to help save this ship. There's also this dude, a member of, I guess, whatever species built this ship and the hospital space stations in the first place, who's pregnant because in their society, men have boys and women have girls. And so that gave Graham and Ryan something to do in this episode. They befriended this guy and they hung out with him when he was delivering his baby. And there's this subplot about this dude wondering whether or not he's fit to be a father and considering putting this baby up for adoption, and that gives the narrative an opening to explore Ryan's father and his relationship with his father and what all is up with that, because it's been hinted at a couple of times throughout the course of this season that his father is not a very good person and certainly wasn't in his life as much as Ryan would have wanted. The sets were fantastic, the ship looked great, the character work in this was really good, the writing was really good, the monster was very well realized. It was a really solid episode of Doctor Who, and that's really all I can say about it. Honestly, I don't have anything more to say. Like, I guess I could talk about the Doctors aside from the Doctor herself. At the beginning of the episode, there's two Doctor characters manning this ship, but at the end there's only one, because at the end of the first act of the episode, one of them sacrifices himself, helping the Doctor to investigate what it is that's boarded the ship. He accidentally gets ejected into space by the Pating. It was a very emotional scene, despite the fact that we had only just met this character, and he got quite a heroic death, a much more heroic death than some Doctor Who extras tend to get. And since Graham and Ryan were tied up helping the pregnant dude, Yaz got a lot to do in this episode. She got to actively take part in helping the Doctor stop this creature. And there's some great world building in this too. Like, for example, there's some dialogue with the general character where we learn that the Doctor's name has started to spread throughout the universe again, despite the 11th Doctor's efforts. Her people apparently have an entire volume of histories on the Doctor and all the amazing things that the Doctor's done. And the Doctor takes pride in that in this episode, despite the fact that like 2 regenerations ago she didn't want her name in history books, but whatever. It's a bit of a retcon of the Doctor's personality and motivations, but it's also fantastic world building, so I'll let it slide. If I had to nitpick anything in this episode, I guess it would be the Pating itself, or rather, the way the Pating was written to put the Doctor in a very specific sort of situation. I mentioned that the Pating is nigh indestructible. The Doctor does eventually deduce that it's seeking out energy sources and consuming them to absorb energy. That doesn't necessarily track with everything that we had seen the Pating doing throughout this episode, because some of the things that it was consuming weren't power sources as far as I could tell. But whatever, for a last minute twist, it's perfectly fine. And it does allow the Doctor to take the very same bomb that the hospital would have used to remote detonate the ship if it was bringing something dangerous into the hospital, to lure the Pating away and then blast it away from the ship, while also feeding it and making it happy, which is of course a good thing, objectively speaking. This thing is just an animal, it's just acting on instinct, so of course I don't want it to die if there's another option. But once again, I have to ask myself, how far does the Doctor's new pacifism go? Like, again, the Doctor's always been a bit of a pacifist. The Doctor's always believed in finding peaceful solutions first, but this version of the Doctor takes it so much further than pretty much any past version ever has. And after watching this episode, I can't help but ask the question, if the Pating had been indestructible, except that it could be destroyed from the inside out, and therefore the bomb would have killed it, rather than just knocking it away from the ship harmlessly, would the Doctor have still gone through with this plan? Or would she have waited, trying to find a different solution, and ended up getting more people killed? Maybe all of them killed. I'm going to talk about this more in the My Thoughts video that I mentioned at the top of this review, so I'm not going to get into it too much here. I mean, I've already gotten into this in other reviews anyway. I'm sure I'm starting to sound like a broken record at this point one way or the other, but I have to ask, is this going somewhere? Is the Doctor eventually going to have to face a situation where her pacifistic ideals are tested? Because if not, I'm going to be really pissed off. And at least this episode didn't proclaim the Doctor's pacifism as often as possible like some past episodes have, and it didn't have a bit of a twisted moral at the end where the Doctor insists that it's better to let the creature suffer and die slowly than to put it out of its misery or anything like that. But the monster in this episode was still specifically written so that the Doctor could deal with it in a violent way without killing it, and that's just a little too contrived for me. Just a tad. Like, you can't really see it. My fingers are like barely apart, but they are apart because it's just that much too contrived for me at this point. But the more that this keeps happening, the more contrived it's going to feel, and if it doesn't pay off, or it takes a long time to pay off on this personality aspect of the Doctor, the longer it takes, I'm just going to be more disappointed. And granted, part of this is probably paranoia left over from Moffat's run on the show, where he'd build stuff up, and then the payoff wouldn't be as great as I expected it to be, but I don't think that that invalidates this particular criticism. But that's just a relatively minor nitpick in what is otherwise a pretty fantastic episode. I mean, I know I keep calling this an average episode, but keep in mind, that's average for Doctor Who, and I do think that Doctor Who is one of the consistently best shows on television. Therefore, an average episode of this show is still a really good, if not great, episode of television. All of that said, though, guys, what do you think of the Tsuranga Conundrum? That's quite a mouthful. If you have seen it, let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over at my Discord. Seriously, go to my Discord. There will be a link down in the description. But either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.